The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Corruption undermines trust, and trust is the basis of legitimate government. I'm pleased to speak on this bill to establish a National Anti-Corruption Commission that will have a broad, independent jurisdiction to investigate serious or systemic corruption, including criminal and non-criminal conduct and conduct that occurred before this commission is established. Having been a member of the Joint Select Committee which examined the legislation, I was satisfied with the committee process and grateful to all those who took part, both committee members and the witnesses. I wish to pay a special tribute to the committee secretariat and the Parliamentary Council, whose expertise and professionalism enabled us all to work within the timeframe. In speaking of favour of the bill, I want to go back to what I said in my first speech some 5 months ago. I said then that the integrity and respect are vital in our national institutions and that I was keen to examine and to vote on legislation for a Federal Integrity Commission. This is, in fact, one of the reasons I decided to stand for office, one of the reasons I was elected in Hasluck, indeed one of the reasons each of the new members of this House sit here today. No one stands for public office without great motivation. One of my motivators for standing was that I was angry with the careless attitude of some politicians to vital questions of probity. I felt deeply the need for this body to come into being. The ALP took this policy to the election. It was front and centre during the campaign. It cannot be overstated just how integral to my campaign and to the campaign of so many in this chamber today the push for a National Anti-Corruption Commission, or a federal ICAC, as we sometimes called it back then, was. Indeed, very early in my campaign, in July 2021, I stated that stamping out corruption is important to me, that we need a National Anti-Corruption Commission, and only Labor would deliver one. There wouldn't have been a single one of my supporters out door knocking on doors with me or phoning the electorate who wasn't also in some way motivated to see a strong, transparent and independent anti-corruption body implemented to stamp out corruption and to start the process of restoring trust in the institution that is our federal parliament, our democracy. And throughout the many thousands of conversations I and my campaign team had, at that time, I cannot recall one individual who argued against the concept of an independent federal body with the power to investigate corruption. There is no doubt in my mind that the lack of an anti-corruption body and the steadfast promise that Labor would deliver one had a significant influence on the election result. This is not to understate the suite of important reforms and policies we took to the election and have already started to implement here. But I know that I am far from alone when I talk about the power of the promise to hold power to account and to restore trust. Many people from all around Hasluck followed the announcement of this policy closely during the election. Chris Miller stated, "This is one of the most important policy initiatives of the election." Jonathan Mann of Lesmurdy commented simply, "We need this." Peter Williamson of Gidgegannup said, "Sing this long and loud. We need to stamp out corruption in all our public organisations." Rob Richardson of Mundaring agreed, saying, "Too many in government turn a blind eye to the goings-on in government. Remember, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept." And really, Deputy Speaker, how can we expect people to uphold standards in their daily lives, in their workplaces, in their business dealings and in their other interactions within their communities if we do not here hold ourselves and the whole of government to the highest of standards here? In this, government must lead. The Coalition had announced plans for an Integrity Commission back in December 2018. No bill was brought to the Parliament. A model was floated which was generally regarded as lacking teeth. No one will describe this bill as lacking teeth. There may yet be some members here or in the other place who don't want to see an Integrity Commission. I hope not, because as I said at the start, corruption undermines trust and trust is the basis for legitimate government. The Coalition members, though, who served on the Joint Select Committee are fully supportive and played an integral role in examining the legislation. Crossbench members too were constructive in that process. I need to especially mention the fine role played by Senator White, who chaired the committee and did so with respect, and the Deputy Chair, the member for Indi, whose dedication to this area of governance is commendable. Interest in reviewing the bill, though, was not limited to committee members, staff and witnesses. Members of the public too have been following the process of the review with great interest. On the 6th of October, soon after joining the Joint Select Committee and it had begun its work, I announced to the Hasluck electorate via social media that we had begun examining the legislation so that we could ensure we ended up with a powerful, transparent and independent commission. I'll share one comment from a supporter, Ms Denise Murphy, who replied as follows: "Thank you. Wishing the committee all the best in their endeavours on our behalf." A simple comment, heavy with meaning. I was thanked for my work on the committee before we had even started. Ms Murphy wished us well as we embarked on our work. She recognised that it was indeed an endeavour, that we had serious work to do. And above all, the committee's work, as the Parliament's work, was done on behalf of every Australian. On our behalf. This is true of any work done in any committee and in the Parliament. I think that it is especially true where the legislation goes to the heart of good governance itself, as this bill does. I will make a few comments about the bill. The proposed commission has a broad jurisdiction. One of the important aspects of that broad jurisdiction, and one I know that is important to the Attorney-General, is that it treats all of those covered, from the Prime Minister all the way down to the most recently employed public servant, equally. Australians expect and appreciate that equality of treatment. The Commission will be independent. Its power to act on its own initiative is underlined and stressed in the bill, something recommended by the committee. The Commission will have oversight by both a Parliamentary Joint Committee and by the Office of the Inspector. During the Joint Select Committee review process, we heard usefully from a broad range of witnesses, including Mr Bruce McClintock SC, who shared his views on the role of the Inspector. That evidence has found its way into the bill via the second recommendation of the committee to expand the role of the Inspector in relation to witness summons and arrest warrants and other matters. The bill sets a high bar on public hearings. The distinction between the Commission as an investigative body and the subsequent prosecution of corruption by the courts is an important distinction. I think the balance struck in this bill is the right balance. Where the Commission makes a finding of corruption, that finding will be reported upon according to the Commission's discretion under the Act. The Commissioner is also empowered to make statements that serve to protect the reputation of witnesses where necessary. The Government has also agreed to Recommendation 6 of the Joint Select Committee that the Commissioner will be required to advise persons investigated of the outcome of the investigation, regardless of that outcome. I welcome the Government's amendment in relation to the application for warrants. Members opposite have quite rightly been concerned about the politicisation of the AAT, and I commend their interest in that question. Regardless, the powers of the Commission to pursue warrants are significant powers, and significant powers require significant balances and protections. Federal court judges are legally qualified, have wide and deep experience, and occupy a position of status commensurate with the powers sought to be exercised under this legislation. Recommendation 1 of the Joint Select Committee report suggested extending protections for journalists, their sources, and those working across the editorial chain to be also protected. I'm happy to see that recommendation taken on by the Government. I believe in a free and independent press, and if we're serious about restoring trust in the institution of government and our democracy, then we must be serious about the role of an independent press that plays in the process when free in their pursuit of truth and accountability. I am pleased too that the Government has taken on Recommendation 4 of the Joint Select Committee, being that wellbeing safeguards are improved for persons who are issued a summons or notice by the Commission. Commission proceedings will be, by definition and by their nature, likely to cause stress to all involved. Alleviating that stress and supporting witnesses and those subject to the inquiry should be supported. I do feel compelled to address the ridiculous claim by the opposition that unions are somehow excluded from the National Anti-Corruption Commission because they are classified as registered organisations. Unions are treated exactly the same way as any other third party who tries to corrupt a public official. Registered organisations include employer groups like the Australian Industry Group, the Chambers of Commerce, the Real Estate Institute and Motor Traders Association. Is the opposition seriously suggesting now that each of these employer groups should also be regarded as public officials? Let's be clear, the bills we have before us will create a National Anti-Corruption Commission which will be able to investigate corruption across the Commonwealth public sector. It is not directed at private activity. It is directed at the public sector and has a broad jurisdiction to investigate those who corrupt or seek to corruptly influence the public sector. I hope and expect to see this bill passed by both houses this week and to see the new Australian National Anti-Corruption Commission commence work by the middle of next year. The people of Hasluck too hope and expect to see this occur. Lastly, I wish to pay tribute to the Attorney-General, the member for Isaacs, and his team. He has poured a great deal of his attention and energy into this bill, also a great deal of hope. Hope which he referred to in his first speech in this place in 2007, when he spoke of the quality of the laws we make, the policy we shape and the administration we provide. The Attorney-General understands that corruption undermines trust, and trust is the basis of legitimate government. This bill is a testament to his vision.
I thank the honourable member for Hasluck. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable